Today's daf we're going to be learning is Gitin Daf Pei. We're going to start in the middle of this Mishnah. We saw in Mishnah, again, the situation is where the get was written not for the right, the years weren't counted according to the kingdom of the local place. And since that was something the rabbi said has to happen, and they didn't do that, we end up penalizing the woman, which again, we discussed yesterday, all the difficulties with this, and all sorts of things happen as a result. So we saw that, for example, she can't stay married to either one of, but if she got married based on this get to somebody else, she can't stay married to either one of them. She needs a get from either one of them and all sorts of things. So we're now continuing on the list at the top of Daf Pei. Bat Levim and Maaser. If she's the daughter of a Levite, they penalize her that she can't get Maaser. Now, either this means she can't eat Maaser, that's according to Rabbi Meir, who holds only Levites can eat Maaser, or according to those who hold that Levites can't eat Maaser. By the way, we're going to see later anyway, the Mishnah holds like Rabbi Meir, but even if you say like the rabbis, you could say what this means is she can't get a gift as if she's a Levite to get the Maaser. Bat Kohen and a Truma, if she's the daughter of a Kohen, she can't eat Truma, right? Even though she's now, even once she gets divorced from these men, because normally a Bat Kohen could, but she's in the category of a Zonah, because while she was with the second guy, she was still married to the first guy, that makes her a Zonah. Okay, that means if she dies, all of her ketubah money, anything she brought into the marriage goes to her husband. When her husband dies, it goes to the heirs. Now they instituted what's called ketubah b'nin dichrim, which is in order to motivate fathers of the bride to give them a big dowry. What they said was, in the event that she dies and the husband inherits all the dowry of her family, the stuff that she brought in will go to her male children from a previous marriage. So now they're going to say none of her yorshim from either marriage are going to get the ketubah b'nin dichrin, okay? Meaning when she dies and then the husband dies, everything's just going to be split equally between all the sons of the father. Again, knas, another penalty to her that her male children won't get the portion they're deserving of the ketubah. If either one of them die, so she can't do yibum with any one of the brothers, okay, she can only do chalitza. Okay, and again, this is a knas that they don't allow her to do yibum. Okay, that's the end of the case. That's the end of these are listed either, they're called 16 knasot. Some people call them 13. They join a few together, but this is the long list as we saw in Yevamot, the same thing with a woman who marries thinking her husband's dead by only one witness, and then it turns out he was alive. Same thing happens to all these knasot. Now we're going to see a bunch of other situations where the same thing happens. Okay, so same idea. If they wrote the wrong name, okay, so there's a debate about what it means they wrote the wrong name. Either they really wrote the wrong name, it was the wrong name, okay, and then we'd say, or the wrong name of the city, or her wrong name, his wrong name, then, and the city they each come from, then all these things happen. Again, if she got married based on it, then divorce from both, children of mamzerim, all that. Some people say that what we mean is if we learned that whole halacha that you have to write the name in that city, and if you wrote the name in the other city instead of this city, that is enough to basically disqualify this get and tetzei mizeh umizeh, which is quite severe. It's a debate about whether this is the way to understand the Mishnah or not. Continuing. When kol hadrachim ha'elu ba, that means all this list of 16 things are going to apply here too. Kol arayot she'amru tzarotehem mutarot. Okay, this is, remember, it's the first Mishnah in Yevamot, long Mishnah of 15 women, that if this is their relationship with any sort of arayot, that if she is arayot to the Abam, to the brother, then that's going to exempt the second wife as well. So if she somehow has a relationship that's a forbidden relationship with the brother, one of these other ways, and we talked about these crazy cases, how all these things could possibly happen, like if she's the daughter of his brother or something, then the second wife of that person is also exempt from yibum. Now, what if, this really has nothing to do with our case, but it's going to be another situation where we penalize the woman. So these second wives, the rival wife, went and got married based on the fact that there was an Isur Arayot. Their rival wife was not allowed to do yibum because it was Arayot. That means basically there's an exemption, a complete exemption from yibum. So again, the husband died, he had two wives, he didn't have any children. One wife is forbidden by Isur Arayot, one of these 15 relationships, to the brother. So now the other wife is exempt. So she goes, what does it mean exempt? It means she can go marry anyone she wants. Nisu. So she goes and gets married. But then it turns out that the first one was an Ilonit, meaning the one who exempted her from Yibum because it was Isur Arayot is actually an Ilonit, which means she never had simanim of being, she never got to reach the age of maturity. And she has a condition that she will never reach the age of maturity. Now that means that she was never really married to the first husband, which means that she didn't actually exempt the rival wife from Yibum. So the halacha is, again, so she got married based on this. Okay, so she now is forbidden to the Abam. She's forbidden to the new husband. She has to get divorces from everybody. Okay, now she would have to get chalitza from the Abam, and all these things would be true. Now it's a little bit tricky here. So one of the things was mamzer, right? The kids are going to be mamzerim from either one. Now here's another question, which is generally we say the prohibition for a woman to go get married before taking care of yibum or chalitza is only a lav. It's only a lotase. It's not usually something that if you did it anyway, your kids would be mamzerim. So it's a good question why the kids from the second husband would actually be a mamzer. So either you say this Mishnah holds like Rabbi Akiva, or maybe you'd have to say maybe that one doesn't apply. When they say to all these things, it means all the ones that are relevant, right? It's a bit of a good question. Rabbi Akiva actually holds that Chayve Lavim, also the kids are mamzerim. We've seen that a whole bunch of times. Moving on in the Mishnah. HaKoneset Yivimto, a very similar case. The Gemara later is going to say, why do we need both? If you marry the Yivama, okay, so there's two wives, the husband dies, one of them marries the brother, okay, sounds perfect so far. And then the rival wife goes and marries someone else. All's well, but same kind of situation. In this case, it wasn't, but it was Nimtzed Zo Shaita Ilonit. It turned out the one who did the Yibum was an Ilonit. So it's kind of the same as the other. Last time it was the one who exempted her. This time it was the one who actually did Yibum, who's the Ilonit. She plays the same role here. Her role is either because she was forbidden because it was a forbidden relationship, and therefore that exempted the rival wife, or she exempts the rival wife by actually doing Yibum, but in either way, either she wasn't, in the first case, she wasn't actually married to the first husband because she was an Ilonit. In this case, she didn't actually do Yibum because she was an Ilonit, and also wasn't really married to the first husband. So in any case, if that second wife went and got married, same thing, and everything else goes as well. Katav sofer get leish v'shavar leisha. Here's an interesting case. The sofer, and we actually saw this case before, I think. Oh, we saw it in Yivama. That's why it sounded familiar. Sofer wrote a get to the man and a shavar for the woman. The shavar is, I got my get. Okay, I got my ketubah payment. So what happened? Ta'a v'natan get leisha v'shavar leish. But by accident, he gave the get to the woman to give to the man, and he gave the shavar, the receipt, to give to the man to give to the woman. He gave it to the wrong person. Again, this is a good situation of nobody checked. But again, somehow the woman's going to end up being responsible. So she gave him the get, and he gave her the receipt, which is obviously totally ineffective. Now, after a while, we realize we see that the get's in the hand of the man and the shavar's in the hand of the woman, and we realize, something went wrong here. And she never really was divorced. So again, she has to get divorced from both, and all those things happen. Rabbi Elazar Omer, he says, no, in this case, it really depends. If it was immediately that we saw that they had the wrong thing, then it's not again. But now we're going to have to figure out what it means immediate and what it means la'achar zman. But if time passes and we see that he's got a get and she's got a shavar in her hand, then harei ze get. Why? The concern is this, and here's an interesting concern. The concern is that maybe the husband and the wife are going to do a conspiracy. Let's say she married someone else. Now, once she married someone else, she can't go back to her original husband. Plus, she can't get divorced from him unless he decides to divorce her. So if she wants to go back to her original husband, what can she do? She and he can make a deal here. They swap documents, and then they'll just go to court and claim, listen, we made a mistake here. She was never really divorced. And then she can go back to the original husband and ditch the second husband. So in order to prevent that from happening, Rabbi Elazar says, listen, if time passed, then we're already going to be suspicious that they're doing some sort of conspiracy. And therefore, that's the words here, right? Therefore, it is a good get. We're not going to, nothing is going to be true. She's going to be presumed to be divorced, because how can we let the Rishon cause the second one to lose his rights to being with her? So basically, we don't accept this at all. Because it could be he's just, first of all, the conspiracy might only help to get her divorced from the second one. It won't really help her go back to the first one, because she'll have to get divorced from both. But theoretically, let's say he wants to actually, get her divorced from the second one, and maybe she wants to also. This is a good tactic, and they really could use this as a tactic, and therefore no. Okay, so now and by the way, maybe they don't realize that there's going to be all these knesset on them, so maybe they thought they really could do this to enable them to get married again. So now the Gemara starts off with my malchut she'ena hogenet. What does this mean? This malchut, this delegitimate government, right? And that's what it says. Don't write it in the name. If you wrote it in the name of a delegitimate government, then or an illegitimate government, then it wouldn't work. Malchut harisha'a. So they say it's the evil malchut, okay, which they mean is going to be Rome. Amai kari le malchut she'ena hogenet. Why do they call it an illegitimate government? Mishum de'en lahem lo k'tav v'lo lashon. They don't have their own alphabet, their own language. It's all stolen from other countries. Amar Ula, so Ula now says, why do we have to do it according to the local authorities? Mishum shlo malchut. We want to have good relations with our neighbors, and therefore, in order to have good relations, we have to write in what's a good way to do it? In your documents, write to the malchut, the local authorities, and then they'll say, oh, look, the Jews have respect for us. To which the Gemara says, but this doesn't make any sense. Mishum shlo malchut tetzeva avla mamzer. We understand that you institute this in order to have good relations with our neighbors. But on account of that, we're going to make all of these Gitim disqualified, and the women, and that's all, right? And then cause this woman to have to get a divorce from both. And mamzer, it seems absurd that we would go this far. To which we say, no, really, we do, right? And Rabbi Meir l'tamei, and as we make get divorced, the children are mamzerim. Yes, because Rabbi Meir l'tamei, and here's where we see that the mission is Rabbi Meir. Nuna says in the name of Ula that Omer Haya Rabbi Meir. If you change from anything the rabbi said and get, the child of the new marriage is a mamzer. Okay, so this now we see that this Mishnah is Rabbi Meir's opinion, and the rabbis apparently don't agree. So now the Gemara has to basically explain, why do we have to say Yavan? Why do we have to say Madai? Right? Why do we have to list all these things? Utsrich. We would have said Mishum de Malicha. Well, malchut she'ena hogenet is a malchut that's ruling, right? It ruled at some point. Aval malchut madai, it's ruling now. The Romans were in power, just they weren't where the Jews were living. But malchut madai, malchut yavam, maybe it's a slap in the face if you write in your get a different government that's ruling at the time, just not ruling over you. But if you write an old ancient one that's no longer relevant, well, you could say maybe they won't get offended by it. But now, let's say you go on. So now, okay, malchut she'ena hogenet, they're ruling now, that's a big deal. Even if it was an old ruling, we still have a problem, because again, they might get upset because it was a malchut, it was a rulers. But binyan abayit, my dehave, right? So you might have thought malchut madai yavam because it's malchuto. Again, that's a kingdom. But binyan abayit, when the Beit HaMikdash was built, that's just going back to some historical event. It's not a slap in the face of the local authorities. And that's why you had to say also that is a problem. If they say don't do it to binyan abayit, because that's like us basking in our glory of, wow, look what we've rebuilt the Beit HaMikdash. Maybe it's giving a lot of power to our God, which maybe could compete with their kingdom. But to say the destruction of the temple, that's a terrible thing to happen to us. That's definitely not putting down our neighboring, our sovereign powers. So, tzricha, that's why you needed all of them. So what are we talking about here? If you're saying the Baal, the husband, was in the east, and they wrote in the west, that appears elsewhere in the Mishnah, that you wrote the wrong city of the husband's city. Elalavs, and then obviously the same for the woman. So therefore, Elalav Sofer, what it means is when the Sofer writes, and here it's unclear whether, right, normally when you write a document, you write, this is where, right, the beginning of a ketubah, if you've ever listened to the ketubah under the chuppah, right, they say, Shabbat, on this day, blah, 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 in the city, whatever. So it's the city where the get is, not the city where the people are from, but the city where the get is being written. So it must be the Sofer. Like Rav told the Sofrim, Rav Huna also told the scribes, if you're in Shili, and that's where you write the get, that's what you write in the shtar. Some people say it's the Sofer writes, I wrote the get here. Some people say the Eidim, it's where the Eidim sign, where they're writing it, where they're signing it. So he says, even if you were told to do the get, you were in the place called Hini, but then you went to Shili to write the get, you write where the get was written. Otherwise, it looks like a forgery because you're writing the get here and you're writing some other city. And it doesn't look like, right? It looks like a forged document. Likewise, the reverse. Hini, when you're writing it, write Hini and don't write Shili. Even, right, this is kind of unnecessary to say, but even though you got the order to do it in Shili. You were told by the husband, write a get for my wife. While you're in Shili, you still write Hini. Rabbi Yehuda again. Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, comes and says, this is all Rabbi Meir. Okay, now we're on Amud Bet. Aval Chachamim Omrim, afilu lo katav ela l'shem santal shebe'il harei mekureshet. So now he says, what Rabbi Meir says is what we said in the Mishnah about, right? It has to be Shem Malchut, l'shem this, l'shem that. But the rabbis say you can even write it to the name of some official in the city. It's not such an important person we're going to see, but you could write it even according to the name of some, non-Jewish official of the city. That's fine. So now they give a case. Ha'ugita davaktiv be l'shem istandra debeshkal. Okay, this place was Shkal, and it was in the name of the official there. Shalcha Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda l'kamei de Rabba ki agav namai. So he's Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda says to Rabba, what's the story? Does this work? Shalach le b'ha'afilu Rabbi Meir modeh. This even Rabbi Meir would agree, even though Rabbi Meir said it has to be right. You can't write it l'shem santal shabe'ir. You could write it for this istanda. But we don't really know the difference, but we'll see in a minute. My timer meotama chutu. The reason is because he's also. This is an official, let's say a governor of that ruling country or ruling people. So ruling nation. So it works, to which they ask, but also the Santar Shabe'il is a local official of the local government. They answer, and here we're going to see the difference between them, which we didn't really know because we don't know what these words are. Hatam zila milta, hachashvicha milta. The Santar is obviously someone very low on the totem pole. So he's not very important. So if you write that, it's a slap in the face to the authorities. Why are you writing to him? It's kind of offensive to them. But the Istandra, he's, let's say, like I said, the governor or the mayor or the one that was put in by the government. And basically he's operating as if, right, as the local head of that government. So it's actually respectful to the government to use to count, and what does it mean here? It means to count according to the years that he's ruled. That's really what it means. So if you take some lowly official, that's a slap in the face. You're kind of saying you don't really care about the bigger people. But if you take a big person, an important person, then it's respectful to the ruling nation. Again, same thing. We have a lot of these opinions that people are coming and saying, this Mishnah, again, is not all the opinions. Okay, the Chachamim say the child is fine in this kind of marriages. Umodim Chachamim Rabbi Meir. However, there's one case in the Mishnah that they agree with the rabbis, and this I think leads to anyone who's been at a get ceremony will kind of all of a sudden understand something that goes on there. She'im shina shmo u'shma shemiro v'shemira shavla bamzeh. The rabbis agree, though, that it's very important to have the names right. And if the names aren't right, now again, this really depends on what you say this means. Does this mean if you have the wrong name? Or this might mean if you wrote the name here and you didn't write, right, you wrote the name that you're known by somewhere else, but not the name you're known by here. And that's why when it comes to writing a get, okay, and then it says here, if you mess up the names, right, then Avlad is mamzel. If she gets married based on this, her children will be mamzerim. And this is why when you go to get a get, they will say to you, did you, is this your name? And how do you spell it? And they're very, very, very careful about this. And I'm assuming has a lot to do with this line. And Rav Ashi says, we also see this in a Braita. Shina shmo ushma shemiro v'shemira tetzei mizeh u'mizeh v'chein b'chol hadrachim ha'elu ba. Now, Rav Ashi says, it says in the Mishnah that Haman katanela. Now, who says this? Ilema Rabbi Meir le'arvi v'litzminu. If it's Rabbi Meir, this should have just been together with all the other cases, right? And that's why do you need to say it should have been with the Shem Malchut. It's really the how you count the government, right? How you count that would be the same as you should have just said Shem Malchut, Shem Ish, Shem Ira. You should have just said that was all like names of who we count by, names of who's in the Mishnah. The fact that it's listed separately, we must teach you Ela Shmamina, Rabbanan Shmamina, that line in the Mishnah must be some of the rabbi's opinion and not Rabbi Meir's opinion. Otherwise, it would have appeared together with that. Kol arayot she'amru. So now it says, let's go back. All the arayot, tzarotehem utarot, right? First Mishnah in Yevamot. If those tzarot went, those wives went, v'nisu elu ailaniot. So if those women, again, you have a man who dies, he had two wives. One is forbidden. She happens to be, let's say, I'll take the first case, the daughter of his brother. Okay, so now, if she's the daughter of the brother, which by the way, she could marry her uncle. That's a permitted marriage. So the first marriage was fine. It's just that she's now forbidden to the brother. So if she's forbidden to the brother, that exempts the other tzara, but not if she's an Ailoni. Remember, that was the problem. And then it says if the rival wife went and married someone else, so now they're going to, right, then all these things happen. So now they say, nisu in zinu lo. It sounds like only if she married, but not if she had relations with someone outside of marriage. If you say that, well, then it knocks out. This Mishnah could be raised as a question to Rav Hamnuna. What did Rav Hamnuna say? If you're supposed to do yibum, which this woman was supposed to do yibum, and she did znut, right? Zinta, asura li yabama. She's forbidden to her yabam. She can no longer do yibum anymore. Now this says she can no longer do yibum with the brother if she got married, but it didn't say if she had relations with someone. So this seems to be a question to Rav Hamnuna, to which they say, lo, nisu v'huadin lizinu. What it meant is she went and married someone, or she went and slept with someone. Why did they say married then? They prefer to use a better language, like a nicer language of saying married rather than slept with. They don't like to really talk about znut, prostitution, sleeping around. Some people have this the opposite. Some people say nisu v'huadin lizinu. At first they said married and even slept around. That's included in the meaning, right? The conclusion of the first reading they start with. And then they're going to say, oh, then this Mishnah should be brought as a proof for Rav Hamnuna, who said, by the way, this whole thing about Shomer Yabam Shezinta, Maklok between Rav Hamnuna and others, it's all about Zika. If you remember, those who learned Masechet Yevamot and those who didn't, I'll explain now. When you're supposed to do Yibam, you have this connection. You're connected to the Yabam, even though you haven't done anything yet. And even there might be a few Yavamim, there might be a few brothers, there might be a few wives, but each one is kind of connected to all the brothers. And each brother is connected to all the wives through Zika, which means if you're connected, it's almost like a marriage connection. And therefore, if you engage in sexual relations with somebody else, according to Rav Hamnuna, you now are forbidden to the Yabam because it's like you were a married woman who slept with someone else. The other opinion says, no, Zika is not that strong. It's not like you're married. You're not an Eshet Ish. You're just supposed to marry them, but it's not the same connection. So it wouldn't preclude you from marrying the Yabam after. So now they're going to do, right, the exact opposite that they did last time. So they say, isn't this a proof for him? And then they say, it's only really if you marry, because that's more similar to the situation of the woman who goes abroad right? We want to find a parallel to the basic case where this happens. Excuse me, where we have all these knasot, which is the woman who gets married thinking her husband is dead, goes on and gets married. And basically what we want to do there, right there, we don't want to, one of the things we require, for example, is she can't be married to either one, right? And one of the reasons is because it'll look like, right, she can't go back to the first one because it kind of looks like she's machzir grushato. So here she can't go to the abam because it'll look like she was with, she was married to someone else in the interim. And then, 1 second, right, she can't do yibum basically because, 1 second, right, we're treating it only when she was really married. Okay, because then it's like this other woman who got married based on thinking her husband was dead. But if she wasn't married, then we're not really worried that people will say, oh, look, first of all, you left you were with some other man, you married, and then you came back, and right, and then people will think, oh, look, you can return a divorced wife because you were with her, then you weren't, and then she came back, and all sorts of concerns, right? So also with Yibum, there would be this, it would look like she can go and do Yibum even though she was with some other man, married to someone else. So that's the concern, that we're going to confuse, like this is going to look like things that we might look like this woman who her husband went abroad, and that's only in a marriage case, and therefore this is only going to be in a marriage case. So now they want to know, okay, this is the two cases where she was an Ilonit. Either she was an Ilonit in the beginning, right, for the first marriage, she was an Ilonit, was a problem, or she ended up doing, and again, we thought she was a rayot, she was forbidden, which she really was a rayot, but we didn't realize that she was an Ilonit. She was never really married to the first one in the first place. Or she wasn't a rayot, she just marries the second brother, she does yibum, and then it turns out it really wasn't a yibum because she was really never married to the first one. So why do you need both cases? To the first one where she was a rayot, mishum deloi kaim mitzvah yibum. Well, yibum was never done because the whole thing was she was exempt. So there was no mitzvah yibum, and that's why, right, we're going to have this problem. Aval hachadi kaim mitzvah yibum emalo. This, in the second one, she actually did the mitzvah yibum. Now it's true, it didn't really count, but there was actually a mitzvah yibum happened, which means maybe the whole thing is we're blaming the rival wife. The rival wife is to blame. Why didn't you, right, again, just like this, our woman in the first case was blamed, why didn't you check the ketubah, the get? So here, the rival wife is being blamed. Why didn't you check that she wasn't an Iloni? So when there was no mitzvah yibum, so we could say, for sure, you should have checked into it and made sure before there was no mitzvah yibum that was done, you should have made sure she wasn't an Iloni. But if the mitzvah yibum was already done, then you maybe say, it's fine, right? In other words, it's fine, but we don't penalize you so much because you saw yibum happen. You figured, I must be fine, right? Not realizing that she was an Iloni. But the question, in the end, of course, you should have checked both. And that's why in the end, you need both cases. The question is, what's the difference between them? Each one is teaching us. But if you just had the yibum case, you would have said, mishum de karam yakameh. Well, she was already forbidden to go get married to someone in the beginning, right? The husband dies. She's immediately forbidden to marry anyone else. Then the woman fulfills the mitzvah, but she didn't really do it right. So since she started with an isura upon her, can't marry anyone else, and then got exempted, well, maybe we could penalize her more. But in the first case, she never felt a yibum even. She never had an obligation of yibum because the arayot exempted her immediately. So there, maybe you would think, maybe she's not so responsible because it wasn't like the mitzvah yibum was ever really upon her. Of course, in the end it was, and that's why we have to say it, but sricha. So that's why you need both cases. Okay, last case. Katav sofer v'ta'av v'natan get li shava shovar. Remember this case where he gave the wrong document, or at least so we think, because we have the documents in the other people's hands. And then Rabbi Elazar said, only if it happens immediately, right? If it happens immediately, it's a problem. Later, we're worried that maybe they actually are just trying to act together, and maybe it's just not true that she got the shovar, the receipt, and he got the get. So what's considered immediate, the Rabbi Elazar says, and what's considered after time? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, altar is what you would think, immediate, right then and there. La'achar zman, right? What's that? Amdu zeu la'achar zman. If they all got up and went home, and then you find out later, then we're worried already that maybe they swapped documents. Rav Ada bar Ava has a totally different explanation. Amal lo niseit zeu la'alter. Not married, She didn't get married yet. That's still immediate. Immediate could be 10 years later. If she hasn't gotten remarried based on the get, it's still considered immediate. So if she's not married, then we can assume that there was a mistake here. But niseit zeh la'achar zman. But once she gets married, that's what's considered la'achar zman. Now this actually makes sense because what? Tmnan lo kol imenu mino isha la'abed zchuto shel hasheni. Remember what the Mishnah said? We're worried that they're doing a conspiracy to get her away from the second husband. So Rav Ad bar Ava makes a lot more sense that the concern is because of her second husband. But what's the second husband according to Shmuel? If it happened right away and she hasn't gotten remarried yet. The point is, maybe they're doing this getting together, knufiya as we call it, a conspiracy, to basically preclude there being, right, someone who might come in the future. Okay, so that's how we explain it, even according to the first opinion of Shmuel. Okay, let's just review. So we continued on that list of the 16 penalties that are instituted on this woman. We talked about penalties also if you mess up the names in the get, penalties also if the rival wife got remarried thinking that the first one was a rayot, or thinking that the first one did yibum, and it turned out in both cases she was an Eilonit. Later on in the Gemara, we discussed what the uniqueness of each case was, why you need to tell us both cases. Then we had the case of the sofer writes the get, and they end up switching them, and then we have that machloket: is it immediate? Is it not immediate? We got to the Gemara, then we said we define malchut she'eina hogenet is Rome because they stole languages from other people. They don't have their own language. Why did they do this whole thing? Because of shlom malchut, respect for the other nation. From there, we got into what's the problem with Yavam? Why are all these cases mentioned? Why do we need all the cases to be mentioned? What is the uniqueness of each case that's mentioned? The Greece, the Binyan Abayit, the Churban Abayit, all that. Then we got to this thing about the location is the wrong city. The city we're talking about where the get was written. That's what has to be written in there. It has to be right. Then we went to say this is all Rabbi Meir, by the way. The rabbis don't agree, although we did say the rabbis do agree in a case where you mess up the names, and that's why people are very careful about that. We distinguish between if you use an official of the government, depending on what his level is, that will affect whether we can count that or say it is good or say it's not good. Then we finished with these few issues of the arayot. Is it just if she marries someone, the rival wife, or is it even if she engages in relations outside of marriage with someone? Will that be the same? What does this have to do with Rav Huna, who said Shomer Yavam Shizin Tasu Aliyah? Does that seems to put znut on the same category as marriage? So does this support it or not support him, depending on the reading? Then we had why you need both cases of the Yavama, and then we ended with this sofer and how we define immediate and over time. Is it defined by time, or is it defined by she's already remarried versus if she's not already remarried? With that, we finish today's daf. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom.